Hi, we're going to talk about another law in this video, the Freedom of Information Act, and also talk about the Information Commissioner's Office, which is an important government agency related to this. So the FOI Act, which came into effect in 2000, stands for Freedom of Information. And it's a really powerful law because it allows citizens, allows individual people to request information from public authorities. That is the main thing it allows you to do, is to get information, and they have to provide information to us as well. So by public authorities, we really mean anything with taxpayer funding, so government departments, the military, the NHS, police, schools, etc. Anything really which gets public money. And the idea is, well, if your taxes are paying for these, you should be able to get information from them. So, for one thing to be really clear about is this does not cover personal information. You cannot request personal details, even about yourself. You can request personal details about yourself under the Data Protection Act, but not under the Freedom of Information Act. So this is just about general information, although it may still be private information. So for example, you could send an email to the NHS saying, "Dear NHS, can I please have data on the number of patients in 2019? And they would have to give it to you." That might be private data, that might not be publicly available, but because it's not personal data, they can give it to you. You could not get a list of all the names of their patients, but you could definitely get a number. Whereas a request which would get turned down, because the law doesn't allow this, is if you were requesting the medical records of a specific person, that would not get allowed because it involves personal data. Even if you asked for it to be made anonymous, they would, I'm sure, still say no. And also this only applies to public authorities. Unfortunately, you can't go around asking private companies. So Starbucks, you can't just ask for the number of employees earning more than 200,000, although potentially you could ask that for any government agency and they should allow you. So it only applies if they are a public authority. Starbucks is public, but it's a private company. Now, as an organisation, what you have to do under this law, if you are a public authority, only if you're funded by the government, you need to first of all actually check to see whether you hold the information they've asked you to hold. So you've got to tell them whether you have it or not. Usually within 20 working days. There are ways extensions can get made, but it's usually quite a quick turnaround. And you should provide the information unless there's a really, really good reason why you can't. So if you deny the request, you've got to explain why you can't provide it. So it could be for the reasons we mentioned before about it being personal information, but also there are exemptions for how long it's going to take them. It shouldn't take them weeks of work. In fact, I think more than 18 hours, they are allowed to turn it down. And also there are a few areas where the government might say no because they don't consider it to be of a public interest. So for example, asking the military for loads of important information, they might say no because it's not good for national security. So there are reasons why these get turned down, but as a general principle, individuals can request information from public authorities. And the people in charge of making sure that this actually happens is the Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO. So this is the UK information regulator. A regulator is an organisation, usually it's run by the government, which oversee a particular area. So for example, you might have heard of Ofsted, who come into schools and inspect the schools to make sure they're doing things properly. They are the regulator for education. And so the ICO are the regulator for information. And so they are basically in charge of enforcing mainly the Data Protection Act, the Freedom of Information Act, and also PECR. And they are allowed to issue fines if individuals or organisations are not following these laws. So they are quite powerful and they are meant to be independent. So they will occasionally fine the government for doing things wrong, despite being effectively run by the government. So they are meant to be on their own. And they have codes of practice, which you could get asked about in an exam. There's not much to say about these because they are quite specific. But a code of practice is basically a set of recommendations for how to follow these laws properly. And so they're not just about punishing people. The purpose of the ICO is also to offer advice. So they can advise organisations how to follow the legislation and also suggest good practices, what are some good things you should be doing to help you make your customers happy, to make sure that it all goes smoothly. Because I think especially the requests parts of the DPA and the FOI Act, companies don't like these. They take up a lot of time to respond to, and so the ICO do try and offer advice on how to do things properly. But they are also there to punish people, and they can be quite aggressive in how they go after organisations not following. So this screenshot was from today, and they announced they have fined 5 businesses £435,000 for making unlawful marketing calls, which is against PECR. You're not allowed to just call people up with no consent. So they do go after people. They're not just providing advice, and they enforce these laws mostly. You can also see on the side other articles which are much more about kind of asking for advice, giving advice. That is what they're also there for.